Good morning. We welcome you to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. I'm Bill Bryant. Hope you're having a nice weekend. Later, big changes and new realities for the Lexington Herald-Leader. We'll hear from Executive Editor Rick Green about that shortly. But first, Kentucky Auditor Allison is here. The Kentucky Constitution sets out the broad duties of the Kentucky Auditor, and then each auditor approaches the job in his or her own way. Republican Allison Ball considers herself a watchdog over tax dollars, and she became auditor after serving as state treasurer, sometimes holding up payments when she had questions. Auditors can search for misspending or fraud, and their staffs also do performance audits to see if programs are being carried out as legislation intended. Auditor Allison Ball joining us now. Welcome. We appreciate you coming in.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You're just over 6 months on the job. How do you describe your term so far?
Oh, I love the job. It is a privilege to do it. You know, I was treasurer for 8 years, and I enjoyed every moment doing that, mostly every moment doing that. And I love being that watchdog, being someone who protects our taxpayer dollars, makes sure people are doing the right thing. So it's an honor and a privilege to get to do it every day.
Do you feel you have more enforcement teeth in this role?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's actually one of the things I was looking forward to. Having been in the treasurer's role, it was limited how many tools I had available to me, and the auditor's job is really about being that watchdog on a deeper level. I really can go into the books more. I actually have subpoena powers, so I have some weight and some teeth behind looking into things. So it's wonderful work to do. It's very fulfilling work. You feel like you're making a difference.
How do you decide what you're going to look into?
That's a good question. So some things are statutory. Some things that you do it all the time. You have to do it every year or once every 4 years. So for example, all of the executive branch of state government gets looked at every year. And that's just one of those things that you make sure you budget your time in to do. You're going to do that. The counties, they get reviewed, they get audited. Sheriff's offices, clerks. Right now we're doing a number of PVAs, and they're only done once every 4 years. So a lot of it is decided for me. I've got to do it. And then I have discretion over other things that I want to do. If I want to look deeper at something, I can. If there's a particular project I feel like needs a special oversight and look into, I can do that. So it's a balance of two things I know I have to do, and I'm going to schedule in to do that, and then the time I have left, what do I want to do?
And so your priorities, I mean, do you think you'll be looking hardest at state spending, at local spending? You have the ability to look into the state lottery, for example.
Yeah.
Where do you think your highest priorities will be?
Sure, great questions. So one thing I have learned in the last 6 months, there's more work than I have the ability to do, and that's a great problem to have because you're not running out of things to do. So you really do have to have time management and resource management. The things that we have to do, we're going to always be doing that and doing that well, and that's going to be looking into fraud, making sure someone's not embezzling, people are doing things the right way. Sometimes it's just making sure government is working at the most efficient way it can. So it's not always about catching bad guys. It's sometimes like, what can we do better? That's always going to be happening. A theme has sort of developed in the last 6 months of spending close attention to juveniles and children, things that impact them. I didn't necessarily set out to do that, but as we've begun to look into things, that's actually becoming a bit of a theme of my time. I don't know if it's going to stay that way for the next 3.5 years, but for right now, that's what we're doing. We did the Department of Juvenile Justice audit that got released under me. It began with Auditor Harmon, my predecessor, and then it finished up with me. We're going to be looking at the Jefferson County public school system. So you've got juveniles who are in detention centers, and then you've got children who are in school. Those are things impacting young people in Kentucky.
That the Department of Justice now has begun looking into the situation with the juvenile justice system. Do you believe your audit paved the road to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel like that's one of our early victories, so to speak, of what we've done while we've been in office. So as you'll remember, we did a Department of Juvenile Justice audit earlier this year, and it revealed some incredibly serious systemic problems at the Department of Juvenile Justice. So these are kids, usually kids who are awaiting trial, ages about 13 to 17 for the most part. Sometimes you get some younger kids, but about 13 to 17 in there. And excessive use of force against these children, lots of use of pepper spray. When we really looked into it, it was about almost 74 times the amount of pepper spray usage that's used on adults in federal prison. So excessive, even abusive use of pepper spray, excessive use of putting children in isolation. That's supposed to be used to just de-escalate problems, and it was being used also as punishment, which is outside of what you should be doing. Lack of adequate care when it came to medicine, making sure kids were getting the medical oversight that they needed. Their education, really a lack of oversight and and follow through on their education. Kids were just being given iPads and told to sit in a room, or having lots of movie days. So really horrible situations involving these kids. Some of them really sad when you look into it, like girls being stripped down naked by men and thrown into the isolation room, sometimes for days on end, not given access to a shower, just dehumanizing things, especially when you're talking about a vulnerable population, juvenile offenders, kids who for a variety of reasons have gotten in trouble. They're in a moment of vulnerability and you need to help them. So I'm encouraged that the federal government is looking into it, and that is a direct result of our report. And I know they're looking to see if there's been civil rights violations and going to address it as needs be.
You said you were looking for solutions. You believe that even trouble that deep can be straightened out? I
do, yes, absolutely. And you have to get that kind of thing fixed. It's fixed in other states. There are ways to address it. First thing you do is you identify the problem, and that's what we did. We identified some very serious major problems. But we were told pretty clearly that there wasn't a lot of policy direction from the top, and that's got to be your first step. Have some very clear policy direction, and then good personnel, good enforcement policies to make sure the right things are done.
Your office is in a major dispute with the governor's office right now.
We are.
You sent a demand letter last week asking for access to records that the Cabinet for Family and Health and Family Services says they cannot share.
Yeah.
It seems to be a dispute over how the law is interpreted here in the state.
Yeah, that's one way to describe it. So the Ombudsman's office is up until July 1st. It's a new office to the APA. So I'll give people an understanding of what that is real quick, because it's kind of a funny word. The Ombudsman's office has been attached to the Cabinet for Health and Family Services for a long time, and it is a part of that system that existed so the public could come and make complaints. If there was something they were worried about, something they were concerned about, not getting the services they needed, they'd go to the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman could investigate, offer solutions, trying to figure out how do you solve a problem if a problem really existed. Well, the General Assembly a couple sessions back said that it needed more independence, and I think it's part of a cleanup effort on that cabinet to make sure the cabinet is doing what it's supposed to do. So moved that part of the office over to my office, the auditor's office. It's actually a nice consistency with the type of work that we do. We usually check on taxpayer dollars. This is a little bit different because the public will come to us, and we're in a sense representing the public in the Ombudsman's office. It's a little different, but very similar in the type of work that we do. So we have had discussions for a year and a half with the transition team over the Cabinet for Health and Family Services to make sure there's no gap in helping people with foster care issues, Medicaid issues, Medicare issues, SNAP, whatever it is. And for the most part, those conversations went really well. But after session, they then came to us and said that the database that you have to use to be able to investigate would not be fully available to our staff. And we had a few back and forths on that, trying to figure out a solution. We really didn't reach a conclusion. They take what I think is an erroneous and even tortured look at the statute. I think it is a stretch, and I think it's strange to read it the way they have. The statute that came from the General Assembly was absolutely clear. You need all records, you need all files, you need all personnel, everybody to do your job. So the staff of the Ombudsman's office had it until July 1, and then it was turned off on July 1. They've been with us for a little over a week now, and they've told us that they cannot adequately investigate and do their job unless they have access to it.
The Beshear administration has said the law was not changed to allow your office to have the access, and that they favor that change, but that needs to be made with the legislature.
Yeah, and again, I think that is a very strange, tortured reading of the statute, and we've gone back and forth with them, and I don't want to get too legalese, too much of a lawyer talking about it. Their reading of it is a stretch. The statute that governs this says all files, all records, everything needs to be available to do your job. What they have said to us, if you tell us what you want to look at, we'll hand it over to you, but you can't really investigate very well if the person you're investigating is the one who hands you what you're supposed to be looking at. So it's a system that doesn't work. We have tried. We are at an impasse. The work cannot be done unless we have access to the database.
Is it headed to court?
It may be.
All right, we'll see. Your office performs audits on state and local governments as well. We mentioned a lot of the work in the state governments. How do you decide you're going to really take a close look at a local government situation?
That's a great question. So I have a large staff, and they are usually the boots on the ground. And we have good communication with the whole team. We have weekly meetings to try and figure out what's our latest, where are we at. And sometimes it really is just somebody kind of just finding a little piece of something and then following the thread and figuring out where to go. Sometimes it's the public, and I'm always encouraging the public, if there's something that you feel like is not quite right as far as the use of taxpayer dollars, perhaps it's a government official or somebody like that, you feel like it's just not being addressed, contact us. We will look into it, and if it looks like it has some legitimacy to it, we want to investigate it. We want to find out if there's something really going on.
There was a hearing this week on artificial intelligence that their legislature is going to look at possible laws next year, or at least a framework of some kind of regulations. Any concerns that you have in that regard?
Oh, I think AI is somewhat terrifying at every level. So, that's going to be a brave new world as we enter into that. There's all kinds of questions about who's making the decisions when you're letting AI do it. Are you doing it well? Are you doing it right? I mean, that's a whole can of worms right there.
We mentioned that the Constitution sets out a lot of the duties, and then you can set your own priorities. Yes. Do you believe that it, is in the scope of your duties to look at how pension funds are invested in terms of whether there may be, as you would consider it, a political or climate agenda, which is a lot that, we're seeing a lot of that this in the country now. As people say, well, we shouldn't put tax dollars in places that are going to hurt the environment.
Sure. So you're really asking, are you going to investigate to see if they're following ESG practices or something like that?
Yeah.
It's a good question. That is well within the office. It's definitely within the scope of powers that the auditor's office has. As you know, the law changed and said that Kentucky pensions cannot be used to use those dollars for political reasons. They have to be invested for returns. And I think that's the right way to do investments, but that is what the law is too. So not only is that what I believe, but that's what the law is. And of course, I was involved in getting that bill passed. So yes, that is something this office can do, because the office does compliance. It's not just about protecting taxpayer dollars and finding fraud and embezzlement. It's also about compliance with the law. And that is one of the things that we are reviewing, because every year we look through and make sure the executive branches are doing what they're supposed to, and it includes pensions and other areas. So yeah, we'll be looking into that.
And these performance audits are still, a very important part of your office, right?
So they are. They've changed a lot over the years. I know Auditor Allison, that was a flagship part of her office, and the office has probably gotten smaller since when she was there, so it just kind of limits your resources that are available. So we are going to be doing performance audits in a similar way. She had probably a bigger staff, and there's certain, I'm being a little technical about it, there's certain rules that apply if you're going to call it a performance audit. Sometimes it's not a full-blown performance audit, but it's performance audit-like, and we're going to be doing more of those.
Are you sometimes pleasantly surprised? We'll get the reports from your office, and it'll say this county, the audit was clean. We looked at this, everything is okay.
Yeah.
Are you pleasantly surprised when it looks like officials have done their duties correctly?
I am relieved. I'm happy. I have told people my goal is not to put you on the front page and get you in trouble. I'm not running a gotcha administration. I want to make sure there's accountability and transparency, and we're doing the right things the right way. But I love it when people do the right things the right way. That's what I really want. Like for this dispute right now that we've got on this database, I just want the public to be served. That is my ultimate goal. I would love it if no one knew that this was happening, if we were able to get the public served the way they're supposed to be served. So I really am in it for the big picture. I want to make sure that things are working well and right, and that's what I prefer.
If people want to contact you or have some information they think you need to know,
yes.
How do they do that?
So, you Google my office, the Auditor of Public Accounts. You could even look at my name and it will show up if you want to, in that way, Allison Ball. But we're always telling people we are available to serve the public. We want to protect taxpayer dollars. We want to make sure government is doing what it's supposed to do. And part of doing that right and well is making sure the public knows they can reach out to me. They can reach out to us. So, yep, give us a call.
All right. Appreciate you coming by.
Thank you very much.
Auditor Allison Ball with us today on Kentucky Newsmakers. And stay with us. Rick Green, the executive editor of the Lexington Herald-Leader, talks about changes for his paper and journalism as a whole coming up on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Changes and challenges for the Lexington Herald-Leader. The newspaper recently announced it will now publish papers only 3 times a week. It is emphasizing digital reporting and delivery. It all comes as the landscape is changing for local journalism across the country. Newsrooms are trying to do more with less, and hundreds of publications have actually disappeared in recent years. Rick Green is executive editor of the Lexington Herald-Leader, and he walked into those challenges and took up that mantle. Welcome. We appreciate you coming in.
It's great to see you, Bill. It's an honor to be here.
You knew what you were getting into.
I sure did. I know. I've been at this since I was about 15 years old, and the industry's changed mightily.
Well, let's talk about the recent changes you announced. The city that used to have 2 daily newspapers, a morning and an afternoon paper, now going to just be printing 3 editions a week. You say you're doing more, though, than just holding on.
Yeah, and what I would probably push back on is that I'm more than a newspaper. You know, one of the products that we perform and then we produce every day is, right now, 6 days a week, is the print newspaper. Well, I'm producing 24/7 content every day on our website. I have an e-edition that comes out every morning. It will be for sure all 7 days a week. So you're right. Come August, we'll go down to 3 editions. Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, but it's not like we're reducing or retreating from our responsibilities.
Was this inevitable in terms of, you just don't make the money with newspapers, right?
It's not so much the money as much as it is the audience. I've mentioned I've been fortunate enough to start doing this when I was a high school sophomore back at home in Ohio. And I've been in 8 different newsrooms around the country, literally coast to coast. And in that time, we have seen our digital audiences just in an uptick, right? Just like that. And our print circulation figures shrink. I've always told all of my newsrooms and every community that I've lived, we're not going to abandon an audience before it abandons us. But the reality of it is, there are an awful lot of our readers that have just done that. They're picking up their news with their smartphone, right? That thing that we all carry, that mini computer, changed the world for us all.
Do they expect it to be free and ad-free?
When you go to Starbucks in the morning, I don't think you expect a free cup of coffee, right? Or you go to Grader's or Baskin-Robbins for a scoop of ice cream. Every once in a while we cheat and do that. We know we got to pay for something. Well, we may be in the golden age of storytelling. I really believe that. We can talk about that. But there's a price for it. It's the price of great content. And that's part of the responsibilities that I think a community has, a news organization like we have, to be able to say, I might not be on your doorstep, but 3 times a day, but boy, we're going to generate high quality, revelatory, and essential content around the clock, no matter the day. You
would say that readers need to understand that it is an investment in their information and quality of life?
I believe in, and I'm not being Pollyanna when I say it. I totally agree with what the Washington Post says. A democracy dies in darkness. And, but we have unfortunately seen so many media organizations, long-standing ones that have been around for 150, 200 years around the country, that because of the economic pressures not been able to make it, and they've closed. Incredibly painful, both for the reader and for the community, but for the editors and the publishers making those calls. We are not in that situation here. Kentucky.com is very strong, very stable. Our digital audience continues to grow. But this is largely in response to the fact that there are fewer and fewer readers who say that print tradition, that habit of an early morning coffee and the morning newspaper, isn't as important as it used to be because of the digital experience.
How do you still get it across, though, that maybe that's where the credibility is, that's where the brand is, that they can trust, as opposed to all of the mess you see out there?
Yeah, great journalism wins the day. I believe that with my whole heart. I always have, regardless of the frequency in which we were putting ink on paper and delivering it to people's doorsteps. So we continue to lock in on that revelatory, high enterprise, high level work that separates us from a lot of other folks around the state, and certainly in Lexington. And I don't mean that as a shot to any other of my peer news organizations, but with our level of experience, the commitment that we have to what we call Big J journalism, hardcore investigative work, public service journalism, that's something that no matter what platform you might pick us up and see, it doesn't matter. That's our commitment to our readers.
You would say it's important that journalism not only survive but thrive.
Oh, it's got to. Yes, I'm not somebody who is looking just to kind of stabilize things. I'm a firm believer that we can grow. And that's more than just an optimistic editor speaking. I think that particularly now when there is so much scrutiny on what's unfolding in a place like Frankfurt, but then take that a step further in Washington, D.C., and what's going on with this election, what potentially could happen with whoever is elected president, there is such a incredibly important spotlight cast on the local impact, but also the local players who potentially could be making those decisions. We all know Mitch McConnell, we all know Rand Paul, but the wild card is, do we have a governor right now who could potentially be a running mate if the president decides to step down, which I think that is far from far-fetched. I think that is something that could very well happen.
The Herald-Leader, many print outlets do a lot of opinion pieces. You endorse candidates.
Yes.
Is it a lot to ask of readers to separate straight news reporting from some opinions that are out there?
Yeah.
And it's the same, the cable television is full of opinion shows and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Americans these days are, what is a fact and what is an opinion is difficult.
Yeah. So we mark anything that is an op-ed, a guest columnist, or our current opinion columnist, Linda Blackford, who does a marvelous job. Very clearly, it's marked as an opinion. We've really been very thoughtful as to when we opine, right, on issues that have local impact or statewide impact. I care about the Commonwealth. I care about Metro Lexington. I care about Central Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky. I don't think you really need to know what are our thoughts specifically on who should be the president of the United States. We don't spend time with those candidates. We don't have that interaction with them. But when it comes to local school boards, when it comes to local councils and prominent statewide offices, we do interact with those folks. We understand who they are. We have long interviews with them, and we can see their body of work and what it is that they've done. I believe that's an important element of what a great media site should do.
Any news organization makes mistakes.
Sure.
What do you do when you see an incorrect fact or even a misspelled or incorrect headline or a part of a piece that could have been better?
Right. We fix it immediately.
Does the digital aspect make you able to do that quicker?
Yes,
right?
very, very quickly. Yeah. I've been in various newsrooms, as I've mentioned in my career, and there have been a couple places that featured some incredibly notorious errors or miscalculation in the way in which stories were presented and the facts that were given. And as a young journalist, I learned a lot of vital lessons. And the biggest one for me that I carry into my newsroom every day is that the only thing I have when I walk in and the thing that I damn well better protect when I walk out is our credibility as a news organization. I take that role very, very seriously. We're not swashbuckling. We're not going to go in and try to play fast and loose with the facts and try to become an MSNBC or a Fox or anything like that. Our job is local news. What matters here in Central Kentucky, what happens across the Commonwealth. We play it straight. We play it with a great commitment to accuracy. And like I said, our credibility at the end of the day is everything.
What do you want to emphasize as far as reporting going forward?
Yeah, so, 2 or 3 things is that to be successful in 2024, 2028, and beyond, we've been around for 170 years, and it's my job to make sure that we have the foundation to succeed for another 170 years. Relevant, essential local journalism. I mean, that's first and foremost. I'm not going to be able to cover every single, small community event, but whenever your taxpayers' dollars aren't being spent correctly, we're going to report on that. When there are major decisions by our local councilors and council members, we're going to cover those things. When things are a little on the funny side in Frankfurt, or there's some questionable decisions and certainly questionable spending of taxpayers' dollars, you can rest assured we will be there, and we'll do it with vigor, and we'll do it with urgency, but we'll do it with accuracy and fairness.
What do you tell young people who might be interested in going into journalism, but is it a profession with a future?
I believe so, with my whole heart. And again, like I said, I've been blessed to be able to do it since I was a high school kid back home in Coshocton, Ohio. It's a different beast than it was, but the core fundamentals are still there. Do you like to tell a good story? Do you feel comfortable talking to people? Do you feel the sense of urgency to be able to hold those who are in power account. Do you look at public records and documents? Do you know how to conduct investigations? Bill, it's such an important industry that needs to continue, and there are many folks who say that the dark horizons and there are storm clouds, and you know what? Financially, it's a totally different animal than it was whenever you and I both started in this business long ago. But yes, I do believe there's a future in it. I believe it's a golden age of storytelling. Never before have we had so many people on so many different devices being able to tell and share stories in so many different ways. Social media changed all of that for us. But I go back to the C word, credibility. A lot of folks are doing it without that credibility and without that obligation and the responsibility that comes from the First Amendment, right? The 45 words that changed the world, and with that comes a lot of responsibility.
Rick Green with the Lexington Herald-Leader. Thanks for coming.
Pleasure
Appreciate
to be
it very
here.
much.
Yes.
Stay with us. We'll wrap up Kentucky Newsmakers. A word about next week's program in a moment. And before we go, a word about next week's program. EKU President Dr. David McFadden will talk about the new school year ahead, and Madison County's Judge Executive will join us, Reagan Taylor. That county about to hit 100,000 in population. That could happen later this summer. We hope you have a good week ahead. Thank you so much for joining us for Kentucky Newsmakers.